Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask Rob and Rob, the show where you get your questions in and we give you answers. And we try and make them good answers as well. And you know what? We've got some great questions coming up, so we'll do our very best to deliver. But before we do, let's give you a quick reminder of how you can get your questions in on the show.
Yep, if you don't know this by now, then you might be new, so that's fine. It's just a case of calling 013 808 00035 or going to propertyhub.net/ask. And that will allow you to follow in the fine footsteps of Tom.
Hi, Rob and Rob. My partner and I plan to buy a series of small properties so that we can let them out in the future and generate a passive income for both of us. We're letting out a one-bedroom flat in Bath City Centre that we own without a mortgage. This is our only property. But we've got 70,000 in the bank that we're ready to invest in a new property. So we want to see, should we purchase another one-bedroom studio flat in the city centre of Bath with a repayment mortgage, or would you suggest going for an interest-only mortgage so then we can use additional funds to acquire a third property more quickly in the future? We're both currently employed and we're not relying on any income generated from these assets in the medium-term future. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you think we should best proceed.
Tom, easy. Interest only. Done. Next question. No, seriously, I'll explain why I personally would always go for an interest-only mortgage. And a wise lady explained this to me once, and it makes so much sense, but a lot of people just don't seem to think about it this way, and I never had beforehand. But the reason is that with a repayment mortgage, you are locked into a repayment schedule. So every month you're paying off your interest and you're paying off a chunk of the capital. And that is set in stone. Nothing you can do about it. So obviously that means you've got less cash flow each month than you would do if you were only paying off the interest. But it does mean that the mortgage balance falls. However, if you take out an interest-only mortgage, you only have to pay the interest. But there's nothing to stop you from paying off chunks of the capital occasionally. So the only difference is you're not locked into a schedule. So most products will allow you to overpay by a certain amount every year. Or even if they don't, when you get to the end of a deal and you remortgage, you can pay off a chunk at that point. So you can, if you want to, pay down the mortgage balance. But because you don't have to, it gives you more flexibility. So why wouldn't you take that flexibility? The only reason I think you might not is if you were actually worried about having the discipline to repay it. If you actually wanted to pay it off, you knew you wanted to pay it off, but you were worried about having the discipline to keep the money saved up until it was time to do so. I can't think of any other reason why you wouldn't want to have the flexibility. The great thing about mortgages is inflation is always eroding their real value. So even if you never pay any of it off, as long as your property value goes up in line with inflation over the long term, and rents go up in line with inflation, and your earnings go up in line with inflation, or even if not in line, they're at least lifted compared to where they are now, then your mortgage balance is falling. The ease with which you can service your mortgage and repay your mortgage is improving, even if you never actually repay a penny of it. So Tom, everyone's personal circumstances are different, but for me, at least for those reasons, this is a very cut and dried decision. And by the way, wrote about this recently in our weekly Property Pulse newsletter. Every week, as well as bringing you the main news stories that have happened that week that property investors need to know about, we give you a little bit of opinion or a little bit of a tip as well. If you're not receiving that email, go sign up. It's completely free. You'll receive it every Friday. You just have to go to propertyhub.net/pulse.
Yeah, it's an absolute no-brainer signing up for the Property Pulse email. If you haven't already, make sure you do. Next up, we've got a question in from Billy.
Hey Rob and Rob, thanks for all the amazing content. I engaged a property mentor who discussed the idea of purchase lease options, which is not something I thought about, whereby I lease a property for a period of time and then with a contract that says that I'm able to buy it at a certain rate after, say, 5 years. It's not a model I'd heard of before. I was wondering if it's something that you'd recommend. Any of the positives, any of the downsides, any advice to recommend? Appreciated. Thanks so much.
So, Billy, lease options, blast from the past. These used to be sold, and what I mean by sold is the training for you to do lease options used to be sold left, right, and centre back in the day. And it was around the time when we'd come out of the last market crash, and people were nervous about the future of property and property prices. So what people would do is they'd take an option on a property, a lease option. They'd lease that property for a number of years and with the right to buy it further down the line at normally roughly the same price as it is today. And people had different versions of it, but that was the method. Now, It was a strategy that could occasionally be executed back then because there would be people nervous about the future of property prices and some may be willing to do a deal like that. But it was very, very hard to execute because let's face it, you've never heard of it before, probably only just about understand it. I've given a very, very high level viewpoint of what it is and probably half the people listening won't understand it. And that's fine. You don't need to know the ins and outs. The point is it's hard to understand. So going to somebody and selling this concept to them that you're going to do this with their home is ridiculously hard. Sounds great on paper. And you know what? If it was easy and there was a big database of people who wanted to do deals like this, then amazing. But there isn't. And you have to go leafleting, knocking on doors, sitting down with people, explaining the process. It's basically a full-time job just to find somebody to enter into a contract like this. You could spend a year looking for somebody. And you know what? You might get lucky and find one, but you will put many, many, many hours into finding somebody to do a lease option. The reason why property mentors are selling courses and mentoring people on how to do it is because, to put it frankly, it's much easier to make money selling the method than doing the method. That's what you always have to remember when people are selling you stuff in property. If they are selling you a method of investing that sounds really, really good on paper, why aren't they doing it? There's normally a reason. So don't be a silly Billy and start wasting your time putting loads of effort into finding a lease option. I would look at a different avenue to get started, Billy, if you can, if you've got the funds. If you have a smaller amount, you could look at something like a REIT. If you have a reasonable amount, just shy of a first deposit, and actually spend your time looking for ways to make more money on the side than knocking on people's houses and leafleting, trying to get them to agree to a lease option. That would be a far more effective use of your time. So, Billy, I know it sounds like I've been pretty harsh on you, but I'm not. I'm trying to give some tough love to you and anybody else listening that to stay well away from lease options and do not be paying anybody money to teach you how to do them, because that's where the money is made, the teaching, not the doing.
There you go, 2 more questions answered. We will do it all again next week, so join us next Tuesday. But before then, I hope we'll be seeing you on Thursday for the Property Podcast, because it's going to be a good one. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.